decolonizing methodology. We will be conducting one final webinar before the summer break this coming Wednesday on cosmopolitics, heteropolitics, and epistemologies of the South, discourses on decoloniality in Greece between theory and activism, organized by my colleague Fotini Tsibiridou. That webinar will be in Greek. In the meantime, we're working hard planning a hybrid symposium in October in which we will incorporate more participatory opportunities such as workshops. So keep following us on our site, www.decolonizehellas.org, and on Facebook. Before starting, I think everybody's met now Natalia Klosa, who is handling the technical part of this. And as you saw, the webinar is being recorded and it's going to be archived on our YouTube channel and later on our site, and it's also going to later be subtitled. So I want to thank our partners, the Pelion Summer Lab for Cultural Theory and Experimental Humanities, which is co-sponsoring this event, the Cultural Borders Gender Lab, the Floating Laboratory for Action and Theory at Sea, the Decolonial Initiative at Brown, the Australian Migration History Network, and of course the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation Office in Greece, which is funding our activities this year. So most of all, I'd like to thank you for joining us, for your patience up to this point, for our participants in particular who are coming to us from Tanzania, Namibia, Italy, Germany, and also Greece. So if Decolonize Hellas can become a productive meeting place between global North and global South, we will be very pleased. In this context, it would be remiss not to mention the coincidence of this webinar with last week's controversial announcement by the German government of a so-called reconciliation agreement with the Namibian government regarding the genocide of Ovaherero and Nama peoples between 1904 and 1908 by German colonial forces and the subsequent looting of their land and cattle. The work of activists who are here with us today from South and from North, from Namibia, and Tanzania, and Germany has been critical to raising awareness of these colonial histories and their pernicious afterlives. So more is still not enough, of course, people understand what is at stake. So for you who are joining us for the first time, I just wanted to say a few words about Decolonize Hellas and its goals. While around the world we are seeing a resurgence and a new militance around the decolonial agenda, in the Greek context, decolonizing is not actually a buzzword. Indeed, there's often a hesitancy, even a hostility to using it. We have been told, for instance, that our project is kind of an American fad. The seeming non-applicability of decolonial thought and practice in the Greek case could be summed up by the phrase, it's not that bad, from either the colonial or the colonized side of things. Yes, Greece has been described as a crypto colony since its so-called independence, the bicentennial of which we're celebrating this year, a kind of corporate colony of the great powers up to its current status as a EU debt colony. But compared to Algeria or India or Namibia, okay, it's not that bad. As labor migrants in settler colonial states, Greeks of the diaspora were racialized, low down in the hierarchy of whiteness, but in many contexts, they slipped across the color line as model migrants and became white. So again, not that bad. On the colonizer side of things, the Greek state in the 20th century mimicked colonial practices of territorial expansion, the so-called great idea, while also, of course, participating through merchant and maritime activity in colonial and capitalist economies. But compared to England or France or Germany, okay, not that bad. The question though arises, is it useful to think in terms of degrees of horror and complicity? Does not that bad mean histories of European colonialism and global white supremacy are irrelevant in our context? That Greeks and the Greek state have not co-constituted them in various ways? Does this mean by the same token that we fail to appreciate significant acts of Greek activism and solidarity in anti-colonial struggles around the world? At Decolonize Hellas, we are particularly attuned to how this not that bad attitude can become a cover for shockingly open and unchecked forms of racism, sexism, Orientalism, xenophobia, and Islamophobia in our society. So the decolonize agenda, in our view, is a very critical part of the struggle many groups and individuals in Greek society have long been engaged in against these forms of violence and power. At the same time, something critical we perhaps can bring to the global decolonized discussion has to do with a very complex connection of Greece as Ελλάδα to Hellas, as the Western whitewashed construction of the ancient Greek ideal. Hellas has been foundational to European civilizational discourses and white supremacy. It is linked to key words like democracy, law, art, liberty, humanism, light, culture, and thus has served as a smokescreen, a hypocritical alibi for centuries of largely unpunished Western terror, violence, lawlessness, inhumanity, and brutality. The decolonize agenda, furthermore, is about decolonizing our methodologies and epistemologies, which will be our topic today. The way that we make knowledge, particularly historical knowledge, and how museums, archives, and libraries, as colonial technologies themselves, have closed the past from the present, put it behind a vitrine. As academics who have started Decolonize Hellas, we believe it is critical to get out of our comfort zone of the classroom, the conference hall, and the scholarly journal, not so much to publicize knowledge that we already supposedly have, as to work together in public space with artists, activists, and local communities to enact a critical history of the present. So this is where the Anti-tour comes in as a methodology we hope to experiment with in our initiative in the coming months. To be frank, and one of our speakers asked me this, what is the Anti-tour? We're not sure if this term actually exists or we're coining it, but just to give an idea of what we think it means, and we see in the work of the people who are participating today with us. There are two senses of anti. One that refers to the content of these tours, their reference to histories that have been forgotten or more often silenced and repressed, histories that do not fit into dominant narratives about the past, which of course are connected to structures of power in our societies and globally. So these are anti-tours in the sense of bringing into public awareness otherwise unnarratable histories and experiences. The anti-tour part is also about challenging the histories that are represented in public space, such as monuments or street names, honoring those who actually committed colonial crimes and shockingly are not punished, but celebrated in this way. Of course, this issue connects to the recent movements of toppling monuments, from the Rhodes Must Fall movement in 2015 in South Africa to the summer's mass defacing and depedestaling of statues of slave owners, slave traders, and racist and colonial figures on both sides of the Atlantic. On a second level, the anti-tour relates to its form. The anti-tour is a kind of hack, a provocative cooptation of a familiar, culturally scripted activity that could, though, turn it against itself. Tourism, of course, is a capitalist, colonialist, privileged way of moving in space, in contrast to other forms of movement, like forced migration, slave trade, the extraction and movement of raw materials and objects, as well as in contrast to a trappedness in space in refugee camps, or simply stuckness in terms of access to the leisure commodity of travel. So can an anti-tour also reflect critically on practices of mobility and immobility in a post-colonial frame? At the same time, can it be a tactic to move around sort of incognito in public space with a group of people? The anti-tour also appears promising to us as an inherently interdisciplinary form of knowledge production, dissemination, and political intervention, a methodology for decolonizing that also might decolonize methodology. It is interesting to note how our participants today, beginning from different starting places, activism, the museum, theater, tourism, oral history, and visual anthropology, have come to bring their bodies together with those of unknown others into public space to do these kinds of tours, often creating them collaboratively, not top-down as experts, but drawing on local knowledge. To what extent are these tours like protests, giving their performative occupation of physical and online space, their transgressiveness as they lead to places that are normally off limits? They can be loud, they can be flashy. In their low scale intimacy, they can become open air classrooms of pedagogy, discussion, and debate about the crimes of history, about responsibility, repair, and restitution. So in short, this is what we are thinking, and now it's time to hear what you all are doing so we can learn from you and be inspired in turn. My original plan was to begin with Christian Kopp from Postcolonial Berlin, if that's okay with you, Christian. Berlin Postcolonial is a group that through various actions is working to situate German colonial history in a global frame and to highlight colonial ways of thinking and societal structures that have endured into the present. I want to start with Berlin Postcolonial for two reasons. One is personal, since this is one of the first groups I became aware of who are employing, among other tactics, the anti-tour and their practices of radical remembrance. And secondly, Christian is the person who connected me to many of the other participants today. So I'm very grateful to him for that. So he's really kind of the silent co-organizer of this event. He has also recently co-authored an article entitled "Small is Beautiful: Post-Colonial Walking Tours as a Form of Street Justice," which I will be loading to our site soon and hopefully translating into Greek. So, Christian,
Thank
the
you
floor
very
is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I would like, before we start, to introduce to you my dear colleague Mnyaka Rumboro from Tanzania, but he's Berlin-based, living with us here for almost 4 decades. And he's kind of the backbone of this NGO Berlin Postcolonial I'm working for as well. So we thought we could do this together, and we would try to be very short, as we have learned that time is short, and there are other groups as well, of course. Please tell us if it takes so long, but we try our best to be short. We sent you some pictures. Maybe you can share the first of it.
Yeah, Natalia has prepared a PowerPoint. Natalia?
Sorry, yes, hold on. Really sorry.
Would you like to make co-hosts?
No, I'm okay, hold on. Because I have to do share screen and, okay. We also have you, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like to start with telling you that we have started our guided tours, post-colonial tour through Berlin in 2007. And actually it was the first thing we did without much thinking. It came close to us very easily, the idea to have these tours, as we saw it as the most direct way to get into contact for more than a few minutes. In fact, the tours usually take 1, 2, maybe even sometimes 2.5 hours. So it's a rather intimate space and time we have with the participants. There was a reason also for that decision to do these tours, as we have in Berlin the so-called African Quarter. It's a neighborhood of about 25 street names, all kind of glorifying the former German Empire in Africa, in African cities, states, or at this time colonies. So today is called African Quarter, but this is misleading. In a way, it should be called Colonial Quarter, as it celebrates the former German possessions in Africa and also the founders of the German Empire. We thought today we should shortly speak about our further aims of these tours, which were not only historical, but definitely in a way very much political and up to focusing on present subjects, and which are dear to us. My colleague Mboro would start with the first subject we usually talk about during the tours, as wider subjects, wider things to discuss. Maybe you can show the next picture, please. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mnyaka Mboro, and I am from Tanzania. We started these tours, as Christian mentioned, in 2007. The reason behind it is that in 2005, 2006, and 2007, we had a morning match here in Berlin to remember our ancestors who died in the big colonial war in southern part of Tanzania, where over 20 communities said, no, it is enough with German colonial, being forced to work in plantations, being wiped, and also they had to pay tax, which they didn't have that money on it. So they said no, and this war was a very, very big one. And you find after this match, really, we found out this history is not being taught in the schools or even in the universities. Nowhere has been talked about. And that day when we started this match, it was in the Wismannstrasse, which you find still. It is not named at that time, renamed at that time, but now is renamed. I'll talk about it. And so you can see here where we are having this street, which we call it M Street. And this M Street, for us Africans, it is really, how should I put it, a racist way of naming us, of giving us a name, because when we look at the word modern, which we don't use, we say M Street, it reminds us back to Mauritania, where we are talking about the Moors in Mauritania, and these were taken as blacks, uncivilized, primitive, no religion, pagans, and just only people who are stupid. Even you have that name too in Greek, it is Maurus, which also has the same meaning. And when we started, there are these streets which really are named other persons. Those are the ones who have been demanding must be renamed. And M Street bring us back to slavery, where we found that this street must be renamed. And we worked for it since 2005 till last year, where they said yes. Okay, the council, the wedding council, district council decided the street should be renamed, but still now you find the name is still there. So might be the way we had, might be this year in the 1st of October must be renamed.
Hey, could you please show the next picture? Thank you very much. And Bodo was hinting at the struggle for renaming streets, which is of course a kind of symbolic way to a very symbolic kind of politics and actions, intending not only to change street names, but to initiate a broader discussion on German colonialism, which was kind of erased from public consciousness for many decades. And it usually works very well, as there's a strong reaction by inhabitants of the streets who are concerned with their names and who often want to keep the names of these streets. So you very easily have a broad discussion in the newspapers about the reasons for these proposals or not. A second thing we usually tackle during our tours is the subject of colonial architecture or imperial architecture in connection very often, or in this case especially, with the presentation of looted objects from our ethnological and anthropological museums. The most famous case is, of course, the Humboldt Forum, the former imperial palace, rebuilt, reconstructed now, right in the city center, in a way in the heart of the Republic, of the German Federal Republic. Combining an imperial architecture with a collection which is colonial, predominantly colonial. And we, from the beginning, with other NGOs, tried to convince the public and the German government to stop this project and first to discuss it publicly, whether it makes sense and it is fitting for the 21st century to have this project. So they didn't listen to us, but the debate has started, as you may have experienced in any case. So even without listening to us, they were forced to discuss all these subjects, and now it's a big problem for, I guess, for the German government to somehow to legitimize what they are doing in front of rising opposition to this worldwide. You may have heard that the German government has decided to return Benin bronzes in next year, which is certainly one of the results of this broader public discussion on the subject. So maybe you can carry on to the next picture. Thank you very much. And I give over to Bodo again.
Yeah, we talked about looted objects, about the streets which are honoring criminals, but the bittermost, it is that you find that in the German colonies, they were so-called to secure their colonies. They started something known as punitive discussions, where they formed a troop, Schutztruppe, which should secure the colonies. So they were going from a city to another city, from a town to another town, from a village to a village, and you find in securing, so-called securing, in fact, there were wars. And these wars, they were not just only small ones, they were very big ones, where you find most of the leaders were hanged. And after hanging them, their heads were chopped off. And these heads, most of them, the women, they had to take pieces of bottles, broken bottles, which the Germans have drunk their beer, and throw them on the earth and cook these heads and take the skin out. Now you can see there, the skin is no longer there. And now they are packing them in boxes, wooden boxes, which are now will be ready to be shipped to German Berlin and also other cities. And you find most of these heads are still here. I was assigned by my grandmother before coming to Germany first in 1978 that I have to bring the head of our chief Mangimeli back, because you find we are suffering all these 100 years because we haven't buried our ancestors completely. And now here they are only in depots and in basements, and we have been demanding them up to now, really, with a very, very small achievement. So we have still to demand them back. And they told us they have to do provenance researches first. I asked why. They said because they want to know whether they are illegally here. But I say they are illegally here.
So could you carry on, please, to the last picture we brought? You have already mentioned the recent discussion on the so-called reconciliation agreement between Germany and Namibia, more or less leaving out the affected communities itself, who are complaining, and we from Germany try to support them and to raise critical awareness of this so-called agreement and the whole issue in Germany as well. So we usually take the tours as an opportunity to talk about the genocide in Namibia as well, which is in a way easy, as some of the streets in the African quarter I mentioned already are directly related to it. So we have the Swakopmunda Street and the Windhoek Street, both places, not only cities in today's Namibia and in the historical German Southwest Africa, but also places for where the first concentration camps of the genocide were opened in 1905. And we talk about the situation in the concentration camps, about the genocide, and you see us here together with Paramount Chief Rukoro and Nama and Herero activist in Berlin in front of the palace of the German president in Berlin, protesting against the way the German government is handling the delicate issue of the genocide. What I would like to end our short presentation with is to say two things concerning our guided tours as well. We do this, when we started, it was like the interest was rather low and we were not very known. So we did maybe 5 tours a year. Now it's up to, before Corona, COVID, it was up to 50 tours a year. And with many, even too much requests at the moment, especially during the last year, the interest, the public is more and more interested in what they see as an empty space in German commemoration culture. But I would also like to mention that we not only do these rather normal tours with us presenting or talking about the history of the place and the streets and so on. But sometimes we work together with artists doing small street art performances, poetry, theater plays, something like this, fitting to the place and giving it another dimension of getting it close to the participants. But we also have to report that the resistance or rather the aggressions of some of the inhabitants of the streets who should be changed and or renamed, and who know us as kind of some of the initiators of this has increased as well. So it's not only that more people are open and interested in the subject to look critically at it, it is also that the opponents of what they see as an onslaught on white German supremacy and culture are getting more aggressive, so that there's hardly any guided tour which has not to deal with kind of verbal forms of racism, sometimes even physical. And we don't know how this will develop over the next month, as we have stopped during Corona, but now we start again and we will see what happens. So this is the rather sad reality in Germany as well. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope it was a little bit in the times and space we had. Thanks.
Thank you, Mavoro and Christian. That was very, very helpful, and definitely confirms the idea that this is a provocative practice that is on the edge of a protest as well. I would like now to give the floor to Ledlo Peringanda, if he connected, but I don't see his name unless he's on another account. Ledlo, are you here? He had written that he didn't have that much time anyway, so I'm hoping that's the reason that he's not connecting, not because he couldn't connect. I'm afraid he's not here. So I'd like to move to Paul Urbanski from Postcolonial Potsdam, which is mostly a student-run group, to speak about their activities. which center on excavating and exposing German and Prussian colonial histories in the palace and garden architectures of Potsdam. In particular, they're going to tell us about an app that they have busily created, if I understand correctly, during the pandemic, which is an interesting dimension. We also want to explore in relation to the Anti-tour, what can be done, the relation between the physical tour and the Anti-tour, the use of locative and place-based media and digital applications in relation to also physical tours as a way of augmenting access, but maybe there's some losses in dialogue and intimacy. We're interested to hear about their experimentations. So, Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and also thank you very much for setting up this very important meeting. It's nice to meet you, everyone. And I don't want to be unpolite, but I guess I missed the opportunity to send you pictures, so I prepared a little presentation for myself. And if okay, I would start this presentation now. Here it is. Okay, hope you all see it. So first of all, my introduction. I'm Paul, I'm 25 years old and I live in Potsdam. I'm a student of history and physics studies to become a teacher in Germany. And I'm part of Postcolonial Potsdam. Postcolonial Potsdam, as you already mentioned, and you mentioned already the most important facts about us, is a group of other students and also former students of the University of Potsdam, mostly in the terms of cultural studies or linguistic studies, or in my case, also history. Our group originally started in 2014, and a lot of inspiration we got from Berlin Postcolonial and also a lot of the theoretical groundwork. So also thank you very much, Christian and Barbara, that you are joining here today. And I'm glad you were before me, so you can talk the most important part about German colonialism, because now I want to focus what we are doing, and that is a park of Park Sanssouci inside Potsdam. So Potsdam is a very little city. It's actually the main city of the state of Brandenburg, the capital of Brandenburg, as it's like, I think, 200,000 inhabitants, and its next to Berlin is often overlooked. So I marked on the map here so I know where we actually are. Potsdam was also the former capital of the Prussian Kingdom and the later German Empire. And I chose this map from the Holy Roman Empire. It's a little older map, because it not only shows the Prussian Empire, but also the old state of Brandenburg, marked here in red, which is also a very important topic of our work. So, but to go deeper inside the field, we are not entirely working on the field of Brandenburg or even Prussia, but we're focusing very much on the part of the Park Sanssouci and the new palace, or it's called here in Germany the Neues Palais, or it's a little bit of French and it's actually just called the New Palace. It was built in the 1800s by Frederick the Great, or Frederick II if you want, as a monument of power, of conquest and repression. It was built directly after the 7 Years' War, which destructed a lot of the Prussian economy and the Prussian military. So Frederick wanted to show his importance on the European stage to building this park and his new palace. The palace was, in his terms, originally created as a place of philosophical debate. He invited a lot of French, German, and other European philosophers, especially Voltaire was a very common guest here in Potsdam. And they discussed a lot of terms and walked to the park of Sanssouci, which is also French and means something like without worries. But as you will see in the next few minutes, it's actually a park with there's a lot to worry about. So our work is about the critical parts of the park itself. It started in 2014 when there was a convention about how to deal with colonial contextualization, about statues, about pictures, and other stuff related to colonialism. And the former students I mentioned in 2014, I still was a student in school, so I couldn't take part of it. But they asked themselves, is there anything related here in Potsdam right before our university to colonialism? And they walked through the park and they found a lot. The first thing they saw were these statues of black warriors. They're actually, as you can see in the background, the only black persons, surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of statues of Roman and Greek mythology. And there's not very much known about these statues, their origin and why they are standing there, only that they are actually erected by Wilhelm II, the emperor who lost the First World War. So another part they discovered were these statues at the end of the park. It was formerly called the M-Rondell. Bor already told you a lot about the M Road and the M Street in Berlin. So we just recently we also had an M Place and M-Rondell here at the Park Sanssouci in Potsdam. Gladly, it already was renamed 3 weeks ago into First Rondell, or in German Erstes Rondell, as its original name was. The name of M-Rondell originally was created in the 1960s. And why M-Rondell? Because there are also 4 statues of black person, which are created also in the 18th century. And they represent a rural African structure, non-civilized and ready to be conquered from the European powers. And you can see maybe on the picture at the bottom right, that those statues actually looking up to Roman philosophers. So they look up to the white privileged emperors and want guidance from them. That is a very problematic perspective, and actually something that is not really talked about inside of the park. So visitors and students, and also students of the university like us, walk through the park, see that statues and have absolutely no context. And that was a problem for our group. So we started our tours in 2014 and refined them over the years. There are actually quite a lot other impression of colonialism inside the park. For example, a rock from the Kilimanjaro, the tallest mountain inside of Africa, which was stolen from there and presented to Wilhelm II. And there's actually a funny story behind this stone, because it's actually not from Kilimanjaro, but it's just a common stone here found in Germany, because it was mostly somewhere in history stolen or taken away. So the museum wouldn't make a big fuss about it, and they just changed it with another stone, which is quite a funny story if you think about it. So, but Africa is not only the thing represented in the park, there are also context about, for example, China. And this is a representation of the so-called China's Rari, form of representation of how the people thought in the 17th and 18th century how China may look like, and they never met really Chinese people, nor fruits, nor instruments, nor do they know what China looks like. Actually, China was just a common name for whole of Asia, for India, for Japan also. And so they created those statues thinking about what they maybe look like. And it's also something not very contextualized inside of the park. So this has what next to it, maybe they think it's great looking, maybe it's nice gold they see, and they don't really think about what they're actually seeing here. There are a lot of other things, for example, pictures of black servants and slaves serving here white kids of some monarchs. And what we do with all this information, we collected it and tried to do a tour. Similar to the tour in the African quarters in Berlin, we try to inform the people about all these topics and the connection to today and maybe what we can do about it. The pandemic forced us to switch to online formats like we are doing here right now. And actually, just before the pandemic, there was a great demand for our tours because of the Black Lives Matters movement. We also asked the people why they are interested out of nowhere somehow in our tours, and they also said they started to think about the topic through the Black Lives Matters community, especially very young people. And that's actually the group we are working and talking mostly of, are students of the university, other university, also visitors from abroad, mostly at the younger age. Our idea was that we can comprehend all the demand of tours, and maybe we are not longer around in a few years to do the tours. So we created in start of 2018 over 2019 audio guide, which is our proudest work. The audio guide is free to access on our website, and you can click on the station and listen to the history behind all those things we represented just now in English or in German with commentary. I asked my colleagues concerning this meeting today, what they wanted to say maybe, and we go through the questions. And I think it's important to acknowledge that we have a lot of support from the public at the moment, a lot of support from a young academic group, but we are still lacking the support of official institutions. Like, for example, the foundation running all the gardens and castles of the old Prussians. And not only that, they are also sometimes working against us. So they're hindering us to tell the story, to tell their own perspective, to maybe make money out of it because they have a hegemony, privilege to talk the history in their ways. And the next thing we acknowledged was that those tours are not only for the people listening to us and for the visitors and to bring a new perspective to the Park of Sanssouci, but also to ourselves, because as you may see, we are mostly a white, privileged and young academic group of Germans, and we have rarely contact to those topics. And so those tours we're doing are also part of a self-reflection of our privilege and how we receive this world. And so we wanted to share this experience with anyone who's interested. So if any student or somebody came to us and wanted to experience it also and does a tour to maybe have this experience, we're actually open to that and try to train them to do tours also. And there's actually a lot of demand, so we don't run out of requests. Yeah, I guess that's everything I can talk about. I try to take it short here. There's actually, as you see, a lot of other places inside of Potsdam I could talk about. Our tour goes around like 2.5 and 3 hours. But I want you to spare the most part of it. So I just say thank you for your attention. And if you want to know more about our group, you can always watch up our website on postcolonialpotsdam.org. where, as I mentioned, everything we propose in English and in German. You can also join our Facebook page or look at our Instagram page. So again, thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you so much, Paul. There's already many overlaps, and it's very encouraging, the part of this being student run, because in Decolonize Hellas, we're trying also to create a student group and sort of get students mobilized in what we're doing. So that's very inspiring to us that you've managed to do all of this work at such a young age. There's also a lot of overlaps already thematically. So I think this is a good time to go back to Africa, to Gabriel Mzee Orio. We've already had a reference to the Kilimanjaro, the false Kilimanjaro, but also Maboro mentioned the issue of Chief Magimeli's missing head. So I think Gabriela can tell us about this, some of these issues from the perspective of Tanzania. Gabby is working, he's running cultural and colonial historical tours through the old Moshi cultural tourism enterprise in the old administrative town of Moshi, which was established by Germans in the early 1870s. And he's been involved in activism also concerning the whereabouts of the head of Chief Magimeli, which, as Boro explained, has incredible, symbolic and significance. The chief who had fought against German colonial occupation and was executed for this in 1900, and his skull was sent to the museum in Berlin and is for study in a classic case of necroviolence. And so the search for this head, and there's been various exhibits about it. In fact, I actually had seen the exhibit in Berlin. So Gabby, we're interested to hear about your work. Here somewhere. Gabby, you were here. Do you see I saw him before on the list. Gabby, are you here? Okay, I saw him before. Okay, we will continue and hopefully he will connect. Okay. So let's, in the meantime, let's move from the German African case to that of Italian colonialism in Africa, and also in relation to the contemporary post-colonial Italian society of migration and racism. To colleagues in the sociology department at the University of Padua, Annalisa Frisina and Betta Campagni, through their project Decolonize Your Eyes. Annalisa and Elisabetta are working together with their students on ethnographic methods of visual anthropology and oral histories to expose the colonial past and its legacies in contemporary Padua. They're part of their Emmanuel Mabayo Mertens of the Erasing Africans Association. It's also part of their project, and he himself, if I understand correctly, is active in running anti-tours in Padua. He's also with us today. So, Annalisa, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for your invitation. So we are organized in this way. I start with a short introduction, then the main floor to Emmanuel, and the final part with Elisabetta, some concluding remarks. So material traces of colonialism are almost in every city in Italy, but only recently, streets, squares, monuments are giving us the chance to start a public debate on a silenced colonial history. Our source of inspiration was Ijaba Shego, Italian writer and journalist of Somali origin. And she, of course, is well aware of racist and sexist violence of Italian colonialism and, of course, of racism and sex in Italian contemporary society. In her book, Romanegata, Percorsi postcoloniali nella città, 2014, she invited us to visually represent the historical connection between Europe and Africa in creative ways. And for instance, she worked with the photographer Rino Bianchi to portray Afro-descendants in places marked by fascism, such as Cinema Impero, Palazzo della Civiltà Italiana, Dogale Steles in Rome. Inspired by her book, last year, we decided to go further giving life to Decolonizing the City Visual Dialogues in Padova. With my students of the Laboratory of Visual Method Research, our goal was to question ourselves, to question white innocence mainly, and to re-signify status, street names in order to challenge the worldviews and social hierarchies that have made it possible to celebrate and then forget the racist and sexist violence of Italian colonialism. The colonial streets of Padova have been reappropriated by the bodies, voices, and gazes of 6 Italian Afro-descendants who took part in a participatory video, taking urban traces of colonialism out of its significance and re-signifying them in creative ways. So I would like to mention the first 5 artist activists, because the the 6th is with us, Emmanuel from a Rising African Association. So I start with the 3rd, Wissal Hubabi. She's an artist, daughter of the diaspora, has held self-definition. She moves with the soundtrack by Amir Issa, No Respiro, a song in solidarity with the movement Black Lives Matter. And she lived her poetry scattered between Via Cirenaica, Via Libya, and maybe I mention just a few words by her poetry. She told, the past is here, insidious in our minds, and the future may have passed. The past is here, even if you forget it, even if you ignore it, even if you do everything to deny the squalor of what it was, the state that preserves the status of frontiers and jus sanguinis. If my people want to be free one day, even destiny would have to bend. The second artist and activist is Khadija Hassan. She shared the photos of her Italian Somali family with a friend of hers, and then goes to Via Somalia in Padova, where she meets a resident living there who has never understood the reason behind the name of a street. That's why Khadija has returned to Via Somalia. She wants to leave traces of herself, of her family history, of historical intertwining, and to make visible the important connection that exists between the 2 countries. The third, Idelaria Zorzan, questions the colonial past through her Italo-Eritrean family photographic archive. The Italians in Eritrea made space, building roads, cableways, railways, buildings, and her grandfather worked as driver and transporter, while her Eritrean grandmother, before marrying her grandfather, has been his maid. Ilaria conceals her fate behind old photographs to reveal herself in Via Asmara through a mirror. Magda Gebremariam Tesfaou questions the colonial map in Piazza delle Erbe, where Libya, Albania, Ethiopia, Eritrea are marked as a part of a white empire. She says that if people ignore this map, it's because Italy's colonial history is ignored. Moreover, today, the same countries marked in white on the map are part of a sub-Saharan and Mediterranean migrant routes. Referring then to the bilateral agreements between Italy and Libya to prevent irregular migrants from reaching Europe, she argues that neocolonialism is alive. Quoting Aimé Césaire, she declares that Europe is indefensible. And then the 5th, Viviana Zorzato, a painter of Eritrean origin. Her house, full of paintings inspired by Ethiopian iconography, overlooks Via Ambaradan. Viviana tells us about the portrait of an N-word woman, which she has repainted numerous times over the years, doing so meant taking care of herself as an Afro-descendant Italian woman. Reflecting on the colonial streets she crossed daily, she argues that it's important to know the history, but also to remember the beauty. Ambalaji or Ambaradam cannot be reduced to colonial violence. They are also names of mountains, and Viviana possesses a free gaze that sees beauty. Like Giorgio Marincola, a Black partisan from Italy, Viviana will continue to feel her homeland as a culture. She will have no flags to bow her head to. So I arrived to the in our participatory video, Emmanuel Bayon Mertis is really important because he introduced an anti-tour in the city center, but I give the floor to Emmanuel. Thanks for this short introduction, Emmanuel.
Hello to everyone. Very nice to be here and to talk about this opportunity we had with Professor Annalisa Frisina. So let me start. Yes, so my name is Emmanuel. I'm the co-founder of Rising Africans. Rising Africans, it's a very small association created among Afro-Italian students of mainly of the University of Padova. The main goal was simply to fight against racism and all type of discrimination. And of course, especially against Afro descendants. So during our tour, we had the opportunity to, can you all see the video? During our tour, we started with, I had the opportunity to talk about Piazza Antenore. It's Square Antenore. Piazza Antenore, the story behind Piazza Antenore, it's very simple. In this place, in this square, you can find the tomb of Antenore. Antenore was a prince from the city of Troy. We are all familiar with the story of Troy, the city who were destroyed with flames. Antenore, like everyone, left his home, his house. Here you can see a picture of Antenore leaving a flaming city, Troy, and seeking for a safe land. That safe land was Padova. So Antenore was the founder of Padova, according to the Greek mythology. And it's a very beautiful story because it's a story of migration. It's a story of hope. And in this tour, I usually say that Padova, one of the biggest cities in the northern Italy, was founded by a refugee. It's a very powerful story to tell today in the city like Padova. So I will show you the rest of the videos. Like I was saying, it's a very beautiful story because it's a story of migration and hope. Unfortunately, Piazza Antenore, Square Antenore, has a dark past because during the fascism period and era, Piazza Antenore went from Piazza Antenore to Piazza May 9th. May 9th is the date of the foundation of the fascism empire. So if we all know the story behind the fascism, the party from Benito Mussolini, the name was changed to mark the presence of the fascism in Italy. So it was very complicated. After the war, the second war, the name was changed back to Piazza Antenore. And usually when you have this proof of fascism and colonialism in a city, a lot of people people usually say that it's an old story. It's the fascism and the colonialism. It's no longer present in the present days. It's not very true, because when you talk about fascism, you can today see a lot of traces of fascism and colonialism. So it's not only stuck in the monuments, it's even back in our mind, in our ideology. I will just pause for 1 minute and see if I can share this presentation. For example, an example of fascism today, you can, in 2008, we had Luca Traini, who went for a rampage, a mass shooting rampage on the, of course, Afro-descendant in Italy, and he wounded 6 people. Before he was arrested, he made the Benito Mussolini salute, the Roman salute. And of course, they find in his closet books about racism and about fascism. Even something very, very public. We have in Italy, we had from June 2019 and from June 2018 to September 2019, we had the Minister of Interior, Matteo Salvini, who is, of course, he comes from the far right party, but once he tweeted "Tanti nemici, tanto onore." Of course, it's a catchphrase coming from Benito Mussolini. So you can easily find today, presence of racism and fascism. Piazza Antenore, for my association, has another importance, because we think that another proof of fascism and colonialism ideology today, it's linked to the identity and citizenship. Because during the fascism, the identity and citizenship of Italy was Italian means white and wealthy. So today, if you are non-Italian descent, if you are your parent or your grandparent are non-Italian, you are not considering a citizenship. You are not considered a citizen. So my association fight against this discrimination. In Italy, we have ius sanguinis. It means that you can be, if you are born from Italian parents, you are automatically Italian. But if you are born in Italy, but your parents are not Italian, you have to wait for 18 years, okay? And you have to apply. But it's very tricky, because you have 1 year to apply. So let me rephrase it. If you are born in Italy, but your parents are foreigners, you have to wait 18 years. At your 18th birthday, you have 1 year to apply. If you apply the citizen application after 1 year, you lose your chance. This is if you are born in Italy. If you are you came here maybe at the age of 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. So all your life you grew up, you studied here in Italy, you have to apply and wait for 4 years. Okay, after you become after your 18th birthday. So you can still find the presence of fascism and colonialism ideology present until today in the law about the identity and about the citizenship. And it's very sad because the government doesn't see at least 1 million people who grew up here, who studied here. The government just say, no, for me, you are not Italian because your parents or your ancestors were not Italian. So it's a very big discrimination. And we use Piazza Antenore to promote this fight, to promote the jus solis. Jus solis means that the right to get the citizenship when you are born in a country. So during this tour, as you can see in the video, we renamed the Piazza Antenore to Piazza delle Migrazioni. It means the place of all migration, because it's a paradox. The Padova was founded by a refugee, someone who left his home, who was forced to left his home and to come here in Italy and to found a safe land. And today it's impossible to do that, because I want to remember that Matteo Salvini, the interior minister, when he was in charge, he blocked a ship with migrants for almost more than 10 days, and they were in very bad condition because he refused the boat to come to a safe port. So it's a paradox. The city, the country founded by migrants today are against migrants. So that's why our tour was in Piazza Antenore. We have this idea to call Piazza Antenore in the Piazza delle Migrazioni. It's a dedication to all the person who left and seek for refuge and seek for a safe place. And Italy today, unfortunately, it's not the safest place, because you have this far-right rampage of shooting. You have this fear. If you are black in Italy, you walk outside with fear because you don't know what can happen. And it's a very strange moment to live in, because now someone like Matteo Salvini or the political view are allowing this to happen. So I think that the video is ending, yes. And that's all. And I'm here after if you have any question. I think I will let my colleague Benedetta speak now.
Okay, thank you, Manuel. I'll be very short. I don't want to take too much time, but I just wanted to give you a broader view about Italian several attempts to decolonize the cities, because in Padova, I work with Professoressa Frisina and Emmanuel and other people, as they said before, in the making of this video. So our attempt is to try then to promote the view of these different ways in which different artists and activists have been facing these issues, and bring it within the school environments and trying to start debates, where they should be started. So we are also part of Decolonize Your Eyes, which is a collective that ran parallel with this project in Padova. But I wanted just to show you, if I can share the screen for 2 minutes. Okay. So basically, I wanted to share with you some photos of the way this collective works, because many people who are part of this collective participated in the making of video as video makers. We had really many helpers. This collective, along with many others in Italy, has been working on urban guerrilla, like attempt to challenge street namings, not canceling them, not erasing them, but as adding some information, if we can call them, about what these places are about. Names of battles, names of massacres, which are completely ignored in Italian landscape. So we also made boards in different languages, because the neighborhoods where these roads are concentrated is a particular one, which is also really multi-ethnical neighborhood. So we also made it in different languages. And this is the main square of Padova, where on the right you can see the colonial map. It's really small, but I think you can see it, where the ex-colonies are marked in white, and it's crazy that it's there. And sometimes I think that in other countries they would have been, they would have already, I don't know, taken away. And this is one of our students who was participating in the video making. And these are other protagonists of the video that you will be able to see if you look at the link we share, and who are also actively participating in the demonstration we made last year. This is what I just wanted to briefly tell you, that in February of this year, this Federation of Resistances was born, which is a group that started in Bologna that brings together all the collectives and associations that in Italy have been working in the last year in these attempts to decolonizing urban spaces. So this group, this federation of collectives, recently created this map, which wants to show some of the places, street names, squares, monuments, which are dedicated in Italy to colonial history and are there unquestioned. And so I can also send you this link if you want to have a look. And so these federations that are parts of groups from Milan, Rome, and Sicily, Padova, so from north to south. And it's interesting because on one side, these central attempts try to set a common agenda on the actions which should start. Like, for example, on a particular date, for example, on the 19th of February, marked the anniversary of the massacre of Addis Ababa by the hands of Italian fascist troops. So we decided to do common actions in all these cities, dedicating this day to a particular person. For example, people who fought in the resistance in the ex-colonies against Italian, which are completely unknown in Italy. But also it gives a lot of freedom of expressions. Like in Padova, we decided to do this urban guerrilla, urban battlefield, at the same time making a video. But in other cities, such as in Rome, they are trying to promote urban trekkings, showing around a particular neighborhood in Rome, carrying Eritrean street namings. And they invite Eritrean people or people of origins from Eritrea, from the diaspora who are mostly settled in Rome, to start tours, decolonial tours, where they can connect the names they see on the road to their memories, which are parts of a common memory, a common history, but which Italy really doesn't want to see, because still today, we don't acknowledge all the massacres we perpetuated in Libya, in Eritrea, in Ethiopia, in Somalia, etc. So these attempts in the last year after Black Lives Matter's waves, they have really started making some noise in many cities in Italy. And this federation is a really big achievement, is a step ahead. So we try to continue, and hopefully things slowly will change, bringing this into a more public debate. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you, Annalisa, Emmanuel, Beta. That was so inspiring. Emmanuel, definitely many things you said about citizenship are totally the same in Greece, and we have so many common problems. At the same time, it's very inspiring to see this network, because one of the questions I had was a lot of these groups have to be local, they're based on a city. You kind of answered the question, but it's very inspiring to see such a great network. And in general, everybody seems to say that there's a lot of, everything is very difficult, but also there seems like a lot of hope, or kind of this thing is building. So thank you very much. In the meantime, Gabby seems to have reconnected. Gabby, are you there? From Old Moshi? I see your name. Yes, no? Are you there, Gabby? This strange. communication. I see you there on the list. Gabi, can you connect to us? Okay. Gabi?
Yes.
Hi. Hi. Welcome. Sorry for all the problems connecting.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello? Do you hear me?
We hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your invitation to participate in this meeting. My name is Gabriel Mzee Orio. I'm a coordinator of Old Moshi Cultural Tourism, an activist, and also the founder of Old Moshi Cultural Tourism. I am living in Old Moshi village, one of the villages perched in the slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. We deal with cultural tourism in Old Moshi village. We do different kind of tours, but I think I should talk about the German colonial tour, which is one of the tours we do, because we do hikings to the waterfalls, we do coffee tours, we do theological tour. But let me talk on one of the tours which is about German colonial history. This tour we do about German colonial history. In Old Moshi, it was a German, Tanzania was a German, and Old Moshi is where these Germans had their military camp, their military base. So we usually organize tours to these areas because we see our history, colonial history is forgotten, and also our history. So one of the tours we usually do, we take people to the old German base, the military base, where we have graves of the lieutenants who were killed by the chief while fighting. Also, we have the hanging tree. The chiefs who are hanged, those chiefs who went against the German rule, they are hanged in front of the people. So we have this tree, which is called the Mgunga tree. Under the Mgunga tree, we built a monument with the statue of the Chief Meli, who was hanged by the Germans in 1900, and his head was taken to Germany and is nowhere to be found. So when we started the program in 2016, the tours were booked less, but now the tours, before Corona, the tours were more booked. Because later on in 2017, I met with the theater performer Conrad Nkunze with Filmworks, which is a film company in Germany, and and they helped in making an exhibition called Mangimeli Remains. So Mangimeli Remains is an exhibition which talks of Chief Meli. It's a photography exhibition with a small film, which takes like few minutes, like 12 minutes, which has really helped in exposing this information about German history, about the chiefs who were hanged by the Germans, because the theater performer Conrad Nkunze linked us to different organizations which work on like Postcolonial with the Christian and Mzemboro. They have really done a good job as they contributed much in building like the monument with the Tanzania network, the monument of Chief Meli, and also we nowadays organize a Mangimeli Day, which was not there before. So in Mangimeli Day, people come together to remember Chief Meli. So there's the planting of trees, there's the culture, the cultural dances. So people come together to remember this Chief Meli, whose head is nowhere to be seen. So also through these tours we made, we were helped to renovate the old court building where the exhibition is staying. So I think let's embark on the questions which you sent me. They said that if they said that these tours, I think they are very effective in engaging broader public and the local communities and activating social challenge. Yeah, by preserving our history and taking the clients to the evidence of the German colonial history, like the Boma, the hanging tree, the monument, and telling the people our history. This really helps. And when we talk of these tours being susceptible to cooptation by political or economic activities as multicultural off-beaten track, I think that the tours are when the people come, the effect will be less. Maybe if there are too many clients coming to the place, then there'll be like erosion maybe of culture. And if we bring historians and activists, performance like artists together to do the tours, then I think it's good. They just will have broader knowledge about this colonial history, and also the tours can both be done by walking and also by driving for those people who are not able to do the walking, because our sites they are accessible by cars. So that's what I have. And if maybe you have questions, you are welcome. I think my network is really having a lot of problems as we live in this village.
Yeah, it's very powerful to us that you're coming to us from the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro. Is that where you are?
Yes, it's
quite. It's very powerful to be able to have this exchange. Thank you so much for that, for the description of what you've been doing. So I'm sure people, I want to leave time so we can have questions, because I am very curious how people on vacation, if they're willing to take in these difficult histories, how it's a different context than in being in the city that they live in, perhaps. So I would like now to move to our last presenter, Areti Kondilivu, who is in Greece, in Thessaloniki. I hope we aren't putting too much pressure on her, the speaker from Greece, but we very much hope to collaborate with Areti in Decolonize Hellas. Areti is in developing this anti-tour idea. Areti is an archaeologist and an anthropologist who works at the Islahane Cultural Center in Thessaloniki, which is interesting in our context for bringing up issues of the multi-ethnic Ottoman past and how Turkish or Ottoman Muslim materialities haunt the Greek public space. Areti has experimented from her position as working in a museum with something, I don't know if she calls it an anti-tour, but something like an anti-tour by using theater and oral history. So Arati,
hello to everyone.
Zoom.
Yeah, you can hear me? It's okay? Thank you. So it's very nice to be here with you. And well, there's not much time, so I should start to tell you that I will mostly speak about some of the tentatives I have made, but also some of the efforts I have been seen by others in the city of Thessaloniki. I think I will just give you some examples of what it could be an anti-tour in the city I live in. So, I'm sorry. I speak better without this, although I listen better when I wear it. So I will be sharing with you some thoughts that could be of interest in a discussion about anti-tours. Thoughts based on my personal experience and reflection, working mostly in the cultural venue of Islahane in Thessaloniki. Could anti-tour be the untold stories? In Thessaloniki, the second biggest city in Greece, it used to be part of the Ottoman Empire until 1912. So it was a big cosmopolitan city with mixed ethnic and religious population. Jews, Christians, Muslims in descending order, but also Catholics and Protestants. Two important dates changed the composition of the population. In 1923, according to the Lausanne Treaty signed between Greece and Turkey, both countries had to exchange population according to the religion. So the Muslim community of the city departed and the Christian refugees from Asia Minor came to settle. 20 years later, in 1943, during the World War II, 50,000 Jews of the city were led to the concentration camps of Auschwitz or Birkenau. Around 1,000 only came back. For many years, those two stories of the city were untold or half told. In the first story about the exchange of population, only the refugee settlement half monopolized our interest, not the departed population. As for the second story, until recently, no story existed. During the last decade, of course, things have evolved. The unspoken stories began to be told. Could a tour based on an unspoken story be an anti-tour? In the city I live in, many untold stories come to the surface day by day. The tourist model still lies on the dominant narration for the monuments and events, the ethnocentric, selective whiteness, if we could say this, of the dominant narration that projects the ancient Macedonia and the Byzantine era as the mainstream and only important periods of the city. But efforts have been made, especially some years while mayor of the city was Yannis Boutaris, we have to say this. Many efforts have been made to talk about the Ottoman past of the city, the Jewish heritage of the city, the political crimes, the murders that took place here. I'm reminding to some of you that may have seen the film Z of Costa Gavras, a political murder. Those last years, some active groups began to organize tours based on the themes I have just mentioned. The Muslim Thessaloniki, the Jew Thessaloniki, the crimes of the city, the music of the city. Are these anti-tour efforts? To be discussed. As far as what I do, working for the Ministry of Culture in the Islahane Center, I have to tell you the story a little bit of the museum I work for. I'll try to make it short. This building that today is a museum, it used to host part of an Ottoman orphanage and technical school, founded in 1873. The remaining building, one out of the four, the one that houses our museum today, was constructed to host the ateliers of carpentry, the machinery shop of forgery and ironwork. And so it was the place where the arts, the skills were taught to the orphan boys of the institution. Later on, after the exchange of population, the orphanage and the technical school stopped its function. The building housed then a private industry, a machinery and forgery until the 80s. In its new life as a cultural venue, the permanent exhibition that was designed, it presented the story of the building in both its periods, the Ottoman period and the industrial period. So it became a museum of itself, of its own history. To make this real, we started to collect stories of the people that worked inside of this industry, stories of the written remaining that we found from the pupils that used to learn their skills inside of the building. So the oral testimonies of the workers are today screened inside the museum. So one can listen about the memories of the working conditions, about the syndicalism, about the salaries, the working accidents. But how could we revive some of the lives of the orphan pupils? Written archives revealed to us names, origins, demands to be accepted to the school, efforts to ensure a better life for those that graduated from this welfare institution. So we created a scenario that became a film which is projected inside the museum. A film with actors that narrate the lives of those that we could not find to interview. So there is an orphan boy, pupil, and a woman that has been working in the industry. So in this film, we hear the voices that we missed. We hear the untold stories. During the first years of its function of the museum, visitors that came added their own stories. Quite often, people, having been toured and having heard the stories of the building, added their own stories of their neighborhood, because they used to go to attend the old school that is next door to the museum. They used to live in an old house next to the museum. They were telling us about the small tavern where the workers after their work used to go. So at the same time, we began to noticed that in our social media posts, in the posts of our social media, people used to comment on their own stories. So we started also to follow other pages in the social media about the old stories of the neighborhood. And we started to collect names, people that used to live there, their small comments about how their life was. And then there's another idea that was born. We made an open call for people to come to the museum. It was on the occasion of the International Day of Museums. So to come to the museum and tell us their personal story that concerns the neighborhood. So we became a kind of local history museum that still collects its stories. On that open call that went very well, many people all day long, they were coming and going. We were all seated around a table, and I had a camera that was filming the whole meeting. Of course, I was asking if people accepted the camera, and no one refused. And during the COVID era, that the museums were closed, all those narrations of the people, after asking them, of course, if they accept, became small, short films of short histories about how, why did this street was named like this? What was the gossip of the neighborhood about someone who used to live here? About many, many things. We kind of felt that the neighborhood was described with people, names, habits, places that no longer exist. Another example that I will, was this a kind of anti-tour or a kind of anti-conventional museum attitude? I don't know, maybe. Another example I would like to share with you. When we organized a tour around the neighborhood of the museum, which is a very beautiful neighborhood because it's next to the ancient walls of the city, and next to the most picturesque neighborhood of the town, the old town of Thessaloniki. So we organized a tour, but not in a conventional way, but with a theatrical way. So it was more like a solo performance, because the person guiding, in fact, was playing a role we scheduled, we created with, of course, historical, based on historical and oral testimonies. So people were very excited because they didn't expect for a person to guide them in a neighborhood through a life story. There was this woman that narrates her life and at the same time explains all the monuments and all the Ottoman history, the refugee from Asia Minor history, the history of the historic walls of the city, etc. The use of theater in general, I believe, is a handful method for all kinds of tours or anti-tours. I think that it helps to have a very interactive and immediate approach to the public. So it's a very big issue that I don't have the time now to analyze. And lastly, I would like to tell you one more thing, one more example, and I would love to have your opinion if this could be considered as an anti-tour action. In Thessaloniki, at this period, we have we have the construction of the subway. During this construction, we have found uncovered antiquities. Antiquities were uncovered in the center of the city. Unfortunately, the plan is to cut the antiquities and put them out of the site to continue the work and then replace them in the same place, if this is possible. So there is a whole movement of citizens of the city right now, for more than a year now, that is demanding not to cut and displace the antiquities, but to for the antiquities to stay in situ, in their place, and for the works of the subway to continue without damaging not even a small stone of the antiquities. To support this movement of citizens, there has been a tour that was offered to thousands of citizens of the city of Thessaloniki, a tour offered for free by this social movement of citizens of Thessaloniki, which is called For the Protection of Cultural Heritage. And people are toured, are guided around the place where the antiquities are found. So someone explains everything about what we have found in order to sensibilize the people and the citizens. And most recently, they have also started to take some activist character and demonstrations. So could this be considered as an anti-tour? A guided tour engaged to a purpose, a guided tour committed to achieve a goal that has at this point become a subject of the political agenda of Thessaloniki and of Greece in general. So I know that I've mentioned many different cases, and I may, if I have the time, share some pages of this movement that because I had no time to prepare more images to show you. But if I can show you, if I can share my screen.
It's down below.
Yes, but I don't see what I want to see. Why is that? Multiple window, no.
Do you want to send us as links? Is it something?
Maybe I'll do this. Wait a
You can
minute, I'll
send
just
it
try it
in the chat.
once more. Okay, so I'll send you as links. For example, this is a link, it's in English, about the how to save the antiquities. It's in Heritage Tribune, an appeal of Europa Nostra to save the antiquities in situ.
Well, thank you very much, Arati.
So I'm sorry I was not prepared maybe better, but I really had not a lot of time those days.
Very fascinating, and brought up the whole issue also of sort of how we make these tours, how they can be made also with local participation. So I almost feel overwhelmed by all the ideas that we've heard tonight. It's so inspiring, and I would like to, we started about 15 minutes late. I made a promise that we would finish on time because I know how long these conversations go, but it really would be terrible not to have some questions. So if you agree, we can have 15 minutes of that we lost in the beginning for technical reasons to have questions to the presenters, because it's all so interesting. Does anybody have a question that they would like to pose here? Starting or right here? While waiting for a question, can I throw out a question? And also first, do the presenters want to ask questions to other presenters, perhaps? To give you a chance first dibs to ask questions of each other. I have a question about how, okay, so one question that sort of Arati gave me some ideas about is sort of how does one actually make these tours? Because we're in the process of trying to figure this out ourselves. Sorry. How does one actually make these tours? You know, it's one thing that we found is very difficult is that the kind of historical expertise that you need is very varied, and because of the way people are trained actually to be specialized in very small segments of history, often they don't have these like, you know, knowledge of various periods of history that are needed in these tours. And also, how does one actually, you know, incorporate the community into making the tour so it doesn't end up, you don't end up leading them? So that's one question. The other one had to do with the publics and, you know, how you make publics through the tours. Like in some of these cases, do people just come by? Could they come by and join the tour, or they sign up for the tour, or how can you expand the publics to get, so it's not always self-selected people who are already interested in, you know, these topics? Like how can you, I don't know if anybody wants, any groups want to answer that. Chris, do you want to also add a question so that we have more questions on the table?
Can I ask this now or after?
Do you want to, should we collect some questions and then,
yeah, sure.
Then we can go around? Yeah, so Chris.
Yeah, I wanted, first of all, thank you to everybody. This is a very interesting, fascinating discussion, and the inputs that I saw from all the initiatives. I'm talking to you from Hamburg, so I would like to, you know, especially, I mean, not goes to, you know, a selection, but especially to the people in the Berlin Postcolonial Potsdam, but all the initiatives, you know, really, this is huge and fascinating. I think not only for people who are working in museums, but especially, you know, people who research about museums and so on. So I wanted to ask you, how do you comment the recent development and turn of a lot of institutions in Germany? You know, in Berlin, you talked about the Humboldt Forum, okay, but also in Hamburg. I mean, where I'm based here the last years, you know, there's an institutional agenda. Now everybody's been talking about, you know, decolonization or decolonizing the collections of huge institutions. We have in the city of Hamburg, there are two major institutions, the museum, the Arbeit, Museum of Labor Work, sorry, and the Mark Museum, the former Ethnological Museum, they're doing exhibitions. So there's this huge like enthusiasm, or the state sort of, in the state of Hamburg is sort of promoting this as, now museums turn to, decolonizing their collections. I would like to ask how our inspiring activists here and community people see this development in the museum space in in cities like, I don't know, Berlin or Hamburg, or in their vicinities. I remember Paul said something about Potsdam, about the institution, the Preußische Kultur heritage, I think. But I would like to hear their take, because I have the sense generally I'm not working in a museum, I'm writing my thesis, but I have the thing that every 2 or 3 years there's a hashtag on, museology or museum heritage. And especially in Germany, some years ago, it was, labor migration in museums, then a gap, a sort of tribute of commemoration by the state or some institutions. Then 2015, talking about refugees and the so-called refugee, summer of migration, then a gap. And then after some years, after the Humboldt Forum discussion, sorry if I'm making this too long, and now a lot of conservative or crypto-conservative or openly conservative institutions talk about or use post-colonial methods or decolonial, or they say they're decolonizing their collections. So I would like to hear the take of the activists here about, this development on museums in Germany. I think. Pardon if this.
Any other question, or do you want us to start answering those, or?
Yelopi, there were two questions by Jen Cowan in the chat.
Oh, okay. Yes, sorry. Can we hear more about how local people and their memories, histories become enlisted in these tours? And has this emerged? Hi, Jane.
Hello.
As the tours got established. Also, do you do the entries ever counter negative defensive reactions? We did hear about that in Berlin. So does each group want to say something sort of to these few questions, and also in reaction to what they've heard? Should we start with Christian Maboro on those questions about how to make tours with local people, the reactions, the politics in Germany on decolonizing? And I'm just interested in this issue of like, how do you draw more people to, or maybe you have the opposite problem though, too many people to the tours, diverse people. Yeah, okay. So, and then we can just go around, and if other questions come up, we'll see. Christian and Maboro?
Yes, I will start about the renaming of the streets. You find people who are living in those streets which we are demanding to be renamed. Most of them, they are not in agreement with us. And if we do ask, why don't you want the street to be renamed? Most of them, they will come first of changing their identities. I mean, the identity and the passport, address, and so on. And that costs money. Then we say, okay, there are those might be cannot afford to pay the fees of changing the passport. Then we can look for someone who can fund that. Then still they do say no. And again, too, you find that most of them, from my experience, they have been always been misunderstanding. I mean, being somehow confused with the political parties. You find those political parties which are not really having the majority in that area. Then they will go against the renaming of the street in order to have the majority of that area. So you find the political parties also, they play a very, 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 very big role. And sometimes we do ask these political parties, why are they doing so? Could we meet and talk? So you find they hardly respond to our request. So that is one problem of this renaming the streets, which you find really, the complaints are not really based on a real reason. It's just only that way. And according to the law here in Germany, if I'm not mistaken, a street can be renamed. People must be not asked, those who are living in that area, whether they agree to it or they don't agree to it. So then, but when we come to this colonial streets, which are under the colonial criminals, is when then this reason starts to be talked over. And to the museums, when we are talking about the museums, especially about Humboldt Forum, me, myself, when you ask me, I do ask this question: how comes, what do the Germans want to tell us, we as descendants of the colonized, to rebuild this palace? This palace was the palace of German colonial rulers. And we know what they did before to Africa, about slavery, about wars, and about racism, and then it's not just only that building. Then in that building there, bring in their Humboldt Forum, where the cultural objects which were looted or been robbed or stolen from Africa are going to be exhibited, where without even involving us, without even incorporating us into it, what really do they want to show us? Are we still living as 400 years? Because I don't see there any kind of a change. And they don't care about these cultural objects, because some of them, they are very, very important for our cultures. And these objects, they are not be supposed to be held by them. But here I'm talking about the ritual objects, because these ritual objects, I always compare it with the Catholic Church. A church without an altar, what kind of a church will it be? So these objects are very, very important, and they know that. And even according to the icon, they are not allowed to hold these objects, but still they do. And then you find in the same people in the museums, they are the ones also who are holding the human remains. The human remains, which we are crying for to be brought back to Africa. And still no a real response to it. But as they are there, I ask myself, it because we Africans, because of our color or what? Because I cannot find a reason why they can't just decide to hold our ancestors in the basements, in the depots, and so on like that. I do ask myself, if it was an European nation, I think it would be different, not that way. So what is really behind these museums? And then you find also these museums, they don't have a common law or kind of regulation to give what they do have there in their museums back to Africa, for example. You find a certain museum will you decide, okay, I will give these two objects back to Namibia, which comes from the Linden Museum in Stuttgart. Two objects, the Bible of Fredericks and the cross, which they took from there. So they just only decide themselves, what about the other objects which are holding and of very, very more important than those two which they gave back? So with the museums, we have a really problem because the museums doesn't cooperate with us. There is no any cooperation, and there is no cooperation between the countries back in Africa. And you find, for instance, Humboldt Forum, there, even Africans who are living here in Germany, they cannot get in there because of different reasons. But just imagine Africans who are living in Africa, who wants to see their history in these museums, even if they have that money to come here, they will not get a visa. So really, we have still a very, very big hard way to go. Thank you much. Christian, will you add to it?
I think we are pretty late and over time, but maybe I would shortly comment on the Chris' question concerning the museums. I think there's reason to stay skeptical about what is happening in the museums, as obviously or this is at least our experience, they're not, like reforming from themselves from inside, but they're reacting to pressure from outside, from civil society. And it is very clear that this is civil society in the global south being now able to connect and communicate to the museums and to the public, even in European states, which wouldn't have been possible 30 years ago. And then the increasing power of the diaspora, like people like Mboro, like not going away anymore, and bothering them all the time with these questions he was asking us as well. This makes me optimistic a little bit that this is a thing which cannot be drawn back again. On the other hand, what we experience is that politicians and museums directors in Germany, and I guess in France as well, are using this as how you call this, an instrument to get hold of or stay in touch with African countries, especially. Being afraid of losing these colonial connections and dependencies to other superpowers like China, for instance. So the Germans see themselves in competition with the French a little bit and say, well, let's get closer connections to our former colonies. They demand decolonization, so we will deliver this, and otherwise we would lose them, these connections and even economic interests for this. So it is obvious that Macron was, like not doing this for nothing, offering the return of objects, which he didn't deliver then later on. So this makes us worry a little bit as well, as we see, sometimes we feel a little bit like instruments of power politics, and playing into their interests very much. We need to be careful, I think.
Very interesting. And do the other groups want to just say a quick something closing? I realize we are very over time, but yeah, Alicia, yeah, we'd love to hear a last comment.
Thank you. Just one comment about the negative of defensive reactions, because in Padova too, we faced this kind of situations. For instance, when we made QR code with our video and we left it in different locations, the neo-fascist groups cover it with other fascist stickers. So it was really a battlefield with stickers. And another example was that after our urban performance, our performance was during the day, and the neo-fascist group during the night make a renaming of streets in a more fascist and claiming white supremacy, and with this ideological fantasy of against the cancel culture. So it was really making explicit a social conflict.
Did Annalisa freeze a little bit for you guys? Has Annalisa frozen for you guys too?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, she froze. Paul, do you want to say a last comment? And if Annalisa clicks in again?
Yeah, sure. I just want
Yeah.
to add a short comment on behalf of Christian and borrow what they said. And in our experience in Potsdam, it is very critical that we tell the story of the affected people, because the institution and the museum, especially in Potsdam, try to tell a story. Tens of years build their own story to tell the people, to make their own heritage, to build their own heritage. So when we start to tell the story of the affected people in the park, of the Black persons discussed in the park, we put automatically the museums and the institution into an antagonistic role. So if we make the affected people the protagonist of the story, the museums and the institution got to be the antagonist. And as Christian already said, they have to act on that. So they feel maybe betrayed, or maybe they feel an aggressive role, and so they act. And for years, they acted very aggressively, and on our behalf, they try to stop or even hindered us in our tours in Potsdam, but they are more, they see that they don't really work anymore. That the public is more open to those topics, and they see that it's not always about protagonists and antagonists. So they act in a more friendly way, and they act with us together and to try to work with us together. But unfortunately, as we already heard in many cases here, that's not always the case. So we also have to work on that.
I think the conflictual part is probably necessary, and given what the material we're dealing with, like if it was accepted too much, that probably would be a bad sign. Gabby, I don't know if he's still with us. Is he still with us? Annalisa, did you want to finish your sentence?
Sorry for my technical troubles. Just to say that we organized a public screening of the video yesterday night for the first time after the COVID restriction. and there was the square of our district full of people, not only the same youngsters, but also thanks to the anti-fascist organization AMPI, older people from the district too. So we are trying to connect different generations. It's our challenge. And regarding Vasiliki suggestion, I think that it's really interesting, and we will try to follow your suggestion, looking for some Italo-Greek in Padova that can give us stories, memories that we don't have. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say this is another agenda here is that obviously there's many things connecting Greece and Italy and Germany, these colonial histories. And we saw in Potsdam, right, the ancient Greek statues above. And, you know, so I hope that we can collaborate. And also, it's interesting what you're saying also about film as being a way, seems like a way that you draw in more people, how you use that part as very much in your tours too, like as a way to sort of open what you're doing. So like many ideas for us. Should Arti, do you want to say a last word?
Very short, because I know we don't have time. Just in what concerns the negative reactions, for example, I would have a lot to say, but for example, even the name of our museum was a discussion, and there was a whole debate about it. People coming to visit us, some people are saying, what is Islahane? This is a Turkish name. It's Turkish. I forgot to explain all about it, because so there are people, educated people sometimes, I don't really, I mean, that say you should call it differently. It's not a good name. Or people are very, are reacting strangely. And one more thing, when I collected these stories, and when I started to make films out of the stories, I also had people that I knew their story, but they never accepted to be filmed. When they saw the short films on the internet available, they called me and they told me, now I want to tell my story on the camera too. So sometimes it has a good reaction. So the internet sometimes can be dangerous, but it can also excite people to tell their stories. So, well, another time we could talk about more details and more things. Thank you all of you, and it was a great pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, thank you, Arti, and everybody and all the presenters. And all I can say is that you've given us so many ideas that we have to hope. I hope that by the end of this year, we have something to show you two, and that will live up to the ideas and the provocations that you gave us tonight. And we will be in touch. And I really thank you, because really I didn't know any of you, even Arti, before this meeting. So it's very heartwarming to be able to get together on this, like common politics and passion, which I felt in this room. So as I said, we're going to be subtitling this, and I will be posting the article that I mentioned that Christian Maboro and I think Jan from Postcolonial Potsdam have written, and we'll be in touch. So have a good evening, and sorry again for the technical problems and for going over time.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Nice evening.
Bye. See you.
Bye. Thank you. And hope to see you sometime, maybe in person.
No problem. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.